Hey guys, how's it going today? What we got here in this video is a very short presentation on what I think is one of the more important topics in the first part of 1302. If you have not read the textbook chapters concerning the Industrial Revolution for the second reading quiz, go ahead and pause this video and do that now, because a lot of what we're going to talk about today assumes you've already read the textbook, that you've already gone through, that you know what the Industrial Revolution is, you know what these monopolies are and where they come about. Because we're not going to really be discussing that. What we're going to do is actually we're going to take that a step further. We are going to be talking about how does the industrialization change the culture, change economy, change government, and why is it such a dramatic impact. I do have some PowerPoints up there. I hope they're coming through on the video. I might post these up on Brightspace. I don't know if it's that much. These are 3 slides of PowerPoints that are basically just questions that I'm going to be covering. I might throw them up there just as a reference, and also the worry that is this isn't coming through on the camera. When I get up, the lighting sometimes changes it, but we work with what we got. So the Industrial Revolution, why am I going to focus on this, and why is this a big deal? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this in a change of life kind of way, right? And largely we're going to compare what changed about Americans, and actually this was not just centered in America, it actually started in England, but what changed in people's lives when you move from a rural agricultural based society into a industrialized modern society like we have today. I'm going to have to be stepping up because the computer I changed the PowerPoint is over there, but I'm going to move over. After we discuss about consumerism and the creation of the consumer economy, we're going to move on to laissez-faire capitalism. We're going to discuss the rise of labor unions in the United States, and then the rise of a new political economic idea coming about in the 19th century that's going to have a large effect on American foreign policy and domestic throughout the 20th century, and that, of course, is communism. So if you can read the slides right here, the first question I want to do in bringing up the Industrial Revolution is to compare how it changed people's lives. The Industrial Revolution is actually really simple. I mean, the textbook does a good job of explaining the facts about it, right? I mean, if the simplest ideas is just going from hand-producing products to mass production of products, right? Just look at everything you got sitting around you, right? From your chair to your laptop to book bag, to overhead projectors, to whatever you have on your desk, right? To a soda pop that you're drinking, to a beer that you're drinking, whatever. Where does that come from? Very little of what we have today is independently crafted, made by hand, and just sold at a market. Pretty much all that we have comes from mass production of products, and that's all the Industrial Revolution is, really. It's this change. And yet, you can argue that this is one of the most significant changes in the course of human history. To go really far back, I don't think it's arguable, and perhaps it's arguable, anything is, but probably agriculture and the agricultural revolution going back 12,000 years ago was the most significant change. It moved humans from being hunter-gatherer societies to living in cities and civilization, et cetera, et cetera. But after that, what has changed so much about humans? And so, let's take a look. Let's just go back 200 years to 1800. And let's examine the lifestyle of an average American in 1800. And then we're going to compare it to 1900. And then we'll take a brief look at today and see, who do we have today? Who do we have more in common with? Somebody living in 1900, somebody living with 1800, and what about that person in the middle, that person living in 1900? Do they have more in common with us in 2016? Or do they have more in common with the average American in 1800? So in 1800, at the time of Thomas Jefferson, right, and all that, most people in America lived on farms. And it was a rural lifestyle. Pretty much the economy, your survival, everything was kind of dedicated to land ownership and to living out on the land. Nature kind of guided your path. The crops you grew, when you woke up, what you did, what time, when you went to sleep. It was all dominated by nature, right? Think about it. So let's say you're Farmer Joe back in 1800. and you're coming back from the farm after a long day of work, and you sit down in your chair a little bit too fast, you're going to suck on some moonshine, have like one of those, I always picture with like a little piece of wheat coming out of their mouth or something, I don't know, right? And you sit back and you just want to go and have your corncob pipe and smoke and drink some moonshine, and you slap on your chair too hard, you break it. In 1800, what are your options to get a new chair? Well, you got several, right? I mean, the first thing you could do is you could probably go down to the local village or market, right? And you could ask the carpenter there for a new chair. He or she, and most likely was a he at that time, probably had one, right? And then you could purchase that. Now, if you had money, you could purchase that through money. But that wasn't the only way to purchase, right? What else could you do, right? Let's say you had 2 chickens and a cow, right? You could make some kind of arrangement. You could barter, you could deal. And say, okay, man, I'll give you 2 chickens and a bushel of corn if you give me that chair, something like that, right? And then you took it home. So that was one option. You could go to the merchant, the carpenter, right? And you could buy with money or you could barter. But what else could you do? You got a little plot of land on your own. Probably got some trees out there. Go outside with your axe, start chopping down trees, start whittling it. You can make your own chair, right? And that's how people lived. And in fact, that's how people lived in 1800. That's how humans lived for 12,000 years since the advent of agriculture. That had always been the way. Let's think about that today. Let's imagine how absurd to us that scenario is. Imagine you're sitting here watching this video, you step up to go get yourself something to drink, and you come back, you sit down, and you break your chair. What do? Do you go outside, go chop down a tree, and whittle your own chair? No. You go to the store. Okay, well, you said Farmer Joe went to the store in 1800. Yeah, but when you go to the store and you get the chair, what is your only option open to you? Right? You go to Target or something and say, I want this computer chair, right? And computer chairs are wickedly overpriced. So you say, they're going to cost you like $200. You're like, what the? $200 for that? Whatever. So you're going to go through there, right? And they say, is that going to be cash or debit? Or if you're extremely old lady, checks, right? And they're going to say, okay, right. Can you say, no. Wait a second. I got a cow outside, 1 second. And bring that cow into Target and say, I'll trade you this cow for a chair. What are they going to do? They're probably going to call the cops on you. They think you're a lunatic. They're going to throw you into some kind of home or say, this person needs help. And yet that's a very modern idea, that we purchase things through money, and that's the only way to do this. And this is the big significance of the change of the Industrial Revolution. It's not so much that we start mass producing things. It changes how we view our relationship to nature and how we review and how we go about our daily lives and what becomes important to our survival in modern times. And this change was taking place all throughout the 19th century. And by 1900, this change was ingrained. In 1900, more people lived in cities than they did on farms. In 1900, most people went to a job and they got paid wages, and they used those wages to purchase products. That's the Industrial Revolution taking hold. And what we get is the creation of what we call the consumer economy. The Industrial Revolution doesn't necessarily start consumerism, but what it does is it thrusts it forward into the main form of economy for the world. Now, what is the consumer economy? It's almost exactly what it sounds like if you know what to be a consumer means, right? To consume something. Now let's think about what do we do in our daily lives, and why do we do these things, right? Ask yourself, why are you in school? And I know, you're going to say, I want to better myself, I'm for the education. Bullshit. Why are you in school? To make more money, right? For 99% of my students, that's the case. You go to school to get an education so you can get a better job, and usually that better job equates to making more money. Right? That's why you're sitting here listening to this video when you could be out doing something else, right? That is a relation of the consumer economy, because we go to work to get paid wages to buy goods. Businesses produce goods so that we can buy those goods. But businesses therefore need to employ people so that they can make money so they can buy goods. We consume those goods, consumer economy, right? And we purchase more. That is the modern economy. It is a relatively new thing in the history of the world, where people work to earn wages so that they could buy goods from businesses, so businesses can produce more goods, so people can work more for more wages to purchase more goods. And that changes everything. Now, sometimes when I make this, when I do this lecture, particularly in face-to-face, students go, well, that's horrible. That sounds so bad. Well, it's not necessarily a bad thing. There's no good or bad. It's all relative to your perspective and what you think is good or bad. At its core, the consumer economy is not a bad thing. In fact, you can make an argument it's a very good thing. If businesses are constantly being challenged to produce new products and having people try to buy their products so they can make more products, so you'll buy more products, there's this motivation to produce the best darn products you can. Not only the best darn products you can, but the newest products, the most innovative products, right? Entrepreneurship, innovation, new technology. How many of you have the new i7, right? One of the big deals didn't have like the earbuds it didn't have a headphone jack, right? And all that, right? I don't know. I still have an i4, but a lot of people are very concerned about getting the new modern technology, right? What do you do with that old phone? You give it back to them for a rebate, or you throw it away, or you sell it on eBay, or whatever. You consumed it, you get something new. Well, what's pushing that? The idea of new innovation, new technology, right? Why are you in school? Right? So you have these skills to learn so you can get, so businesses want to pay you money so you can continue selling that product, right? Or a better product. Or maybe help them out with legal advice when businesses compete, right? Or maybe, people work longer, live longer because of innovations in medical fields, right? So therefore we need more doctors, we need more nurses, we need more anesthesiologists. And it's all a byproduct, once again, of going back to produce, to sell, work, to buy, right? Continuing on. And it leads to innovation, it leads to technology, led to the airplane, led to the automobile, led to the telephone, led to us going to the moon. So at its core, there's not a negative necessarily. Now, there are fears about the consumer economy. If we constantly consume and produce, one of the fears is eventually this economy is going to have to run out, right? We have a finite or a limited amount of resources, however many that might be. There is just a pool of resources, and that's all we got. And if we're constantly consuming, eventually that's getting smaller and smaller, and something's going to have to give at some point. Now, if that happens in 80 years from now, 8,000 years from now, that's the debatable point. But yes, you can make an argument that over time, the consumer economy will have to have some substantial changes to it for it to last forever. But we're not talking about forever. We're talking about something that's relatively new in the past 150 years, right? As human life has radically changed. Which leads to a question that I've largely answered, but I want to make sure it's clear. As you're sitting there watching this video, you ask yourself, what is the most significant, important thing to your survival in 2016? Don't say love or family. Don't give me that bullshit. What is the most significant thing for you to live your daily life? It's money. It's money, straight cash. Not getting rich. It's not the acquisition of wealth, but it's money. Money is how everything works. Don't believe me? Go without money for a month, right? Not only go without money, but go without anything that had been purchased for money in the modern world. So you can't go down to the street corner, right, and accept food and water because the people that are giving that to you have given that to you. They purchased it with money. You have to go out into the woods, right, and start anew, right? No tools, no clothing, nothing. I mean, what would happen to the vast majority of people? Maybe I got some, freaking barbarians here that could rough it out like some Bear Grylls kind of folk. But for the most of us, me included, be dead in a month, right? Because our economy doesn't work that way. The world doesn't work that way. Well, what changed it? The Industrial Revolution. Factories start producing more goods. Well, they got to sell more goods. They can no longer trade for chickens and cows because how many chickens equals this many chairs, right? They need some kind of standardized form of currency to exchange between for these products. So they need laborers to work for a wage, and these wage laborers therefore earn a wage to buy their products so they can produce more products, hiring more people, wage earners, then go buy more products, right? And this goes on and on and on up to today in 2016. What else changes? Well, think about what determined when Farmer Joe in 1800 went to bed. They didn't have electricity. You might have oil lanterns and things like that, but that was very expensive. For the most part, when the sun went down. What determined when Farmer Joe decided to plant his corn or plant his wheat, right? The time of the year, the seasons. What determined whether Farmer Joe is going to have a good season or bad season? The amount of rainfall, right? The amount of sunlight, things like that. Farmer Joe's life in 1800 was completely dominated by nature. Now, is that true today? Certainly nature still has a huge impact on our day-to-day lives, right? Without a doubt. It's about to thunderstorm over here in the woodlands right now and such, and that's going to make my drive home a pain in the butt. It certainly impacts us. But you know what? I'm still going to drive home. Some of y'all might be watching this at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? How are you able to do that? Some of y'all work nights and all that because of these changes brought about by industrialization, right? When were these changes really taking place in American lives? At the turn of the 20th century. And if you compare the life of an average American, you compare from 1800, 1900, and today in 2016, people in 1900 actually had more in common with us in 2016 than they did with people just 100 years previous. That they were at the forefront of that change. The new inventions and technologies that were coming out that we use on a day-to-day basis certainly were much more advanced. But nonetheless, right, they were in their lives. Phones, cars, automobiles, right? Electricity, power, photograph, video, things like that. We are much more advanced on them. They were coming out during their lifetimes, and they start to basically our modern lives begin because of the Industrial Revolution, right? What about education, of course? I've already mentioned a little bit, but I might as well throw back in there again. Why are you in school? We said, to make more money, but then why then do businesses value educations, right? Why do they want that? Well, part of it is the free thought, and part of it is, the skills you need right there. But the real main point of what the value is the Industrial Revolution opens up brand new opportunities, the need for advancement, the need for innovation, and new jobs, right? There wasn't too much need for a lawyer back in 1800. There were lawyers, without a doubt. John Adams, our second president of the United States, he was a lawyer. But there weren't that much need for them, right? There's now more lawyers in law school than there are active lawyers because, as businesses compete and all that, you're going to end up, you need law, you need legal representation, things like that, right? People are living longer. You need more doctors and nurses. Well, why are people living longer? Because better access to medicine, better understanding of our lifestyles and health, right? Why is that? Well, because the medical industry is largely a consumer-driven industry, right? Insurance or not, when you go to a hospital, particularly in the United States, and it's true also in place with socialized medicine, it's just being paid by the government. When you go to the hospital or you need something done, there is a charge to it. There is a fee, right? But that fee and all that is going to prompt innovative doctors and nurses and technicians to come up with new and better ways to improve this. So you come to our hospital or you come to our office and such. And it goes on right there. Have I hit everything on this one? How to affect the consumer economy? Yes, and boom. All right, what we're going to do is now we're going to change gears real quick. And we're going to look at how the Industrial Revolution impacts the day-to-day lives of people. So what is happening, once again, the textbook does a very good job of explaining this, at least the background, the historical facts. It does not do, in my opinion, an adequate job of explaining the significance of this. But when you start producing more and more products and selling more and more products, you're going to make a lot more money, right? And your business is going to grow. You're going to open up more factories or more oil refineries. You're going to expand. You're going to hire more workers, hire more laborers, right? And just sell more product. And that's the way it constantly grows. What's the government's role in this, though? Should government regulate this business? Should government just allow business to expand? Or should there be some regulation to say, here's how you can expand, here's how you need to treat your workers, right? Now, largely today in 2016, the United States government regulates the economy. It regulates businesses. It determines what is fair business practice. It determines things like you have to pay a minimum wage to your workers. It determines things on Can you take over this other company, right? Should you have a monopoly? And the United States answer today is no, you cannot. Monopolies are illegal in the United States, right? It was different in the late 19th century. In the time your textbook is talking about, the overwhelming policy of the United States government is that funny French word up there, laissez-faire, right? Or if you're from Texas, you can go laissez-faire, right? But laissez-faire is a French word and basically means let it be. Some people say hands off and all that. It largely means the same thing. The technical translation is let it be. In other words, the government policy towards the economy is let it be, don't get involved, hands off, stay out of it. Businesses run best when nobody's regulating them. And there's a good analogy about this. Now think about it. If you got a lawn, or you got a little house and got a little lawn, if you don't regulate your lawn, if in other words you don't mow it, you don't or do anything, is it going to grow? Your lawn, it's going to grow. It's going to grow big and expand at a rapid rate. The other side is it going to grow that pretty? I mean, why do we mow our lawn? We mow our lawn so it looks nice, right? And it grows evenly and uniformly. We have the same type of grass there. And that's it. If you don't regulate the economy is going to expand. It's going to grow. Things are going to burst, right? But is it necessarily what we want? Today in 2016, the U.S. government says, no, we do not want it to expand at that rate because then you lose oversight and people get hurt along the way, both the workers and the consumers. And yes, actually other businesses too, right? Is largely the reason that we are no longer laissez-faire. But back in the 19th century, the U.S. government's overwhelming idea was to step back, right, on this. And if you step back, businesses will expand and businesses will grow. And over the course of time, right, certain businesses do better than others, right? Just like at a football game, right? When the Cowboys and the Texans play, they compete, right? One of those sides is going to win. Typically, it'll be the Cowboys because they're just better, but you know what I mean, right? They're going to compete, and one side wins. Businesses compete. Now, let's think about that. Competition. Is it good for us, the consumer, the people that buy products? Is it good when businesses compete? I would say absolutely, right? Because competition amongst businesses leads to higher quality products and lower prices. Imagine there was only one pizza joint in Houston, right? Only like, I don't know, Papa John's, right? That was the only pizza joint in Houston is Papa John's. How many times do you think they're going to send out coupons in the mail? Or have like, specials or like $5 Monday or something like that, or get a free pizza every time the Texans win, right? Or something. I mean, why would they have no motivation or incentive to do that? What would happen to their prices? They would basically charge at the most they could that they think you would reasonably pay. But they can't do that today. You can't call up Papa John's and say, I want a large pepperoni. They say, okay, that'll be $42. Why? Because you'll just call it frickin' Domino's right down the street, right? And all that, because of that competition. And could Papa John's get away with just saying, they're sending a pepperoni pizza and it actually just being, well, actually they do get away with this, they're sending a big pile of grease or something like that. But you know what I mean. They have to have some quality standards or else what are you going to do? You're going to go to the competition. So competition between businesses is good for us, the consumer, right? But what happens if you don't regulate that and businesses compete? What happens over time is some businesses win and some lose. If that happens long enough, you end up with one business controlling most or all of a market or of a certain product. We call this a monopoly, when a business that controls most of the market on a product and removes the competition. And during the late 19th and early 20th century, you're going to see a huge rise in monopolies. And your textbook discussed things like Carnegie Steel merging into U.S. Steel, John D. Rockefeller. At the end of this, we're going to discuss one more that your textbook throws in there, but does not really adequately explain by any means on that. Now, is this a good thing or bad thing? And there's a disagreement. There's disagreement here. It's still a debate today, by the way. And we have a presidential election coming up on next Tuesday, and one of the candidates, a third-party candidate, Gary Johnson, is a member of the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party is still very largely laissez-faire, right? But when you get into the Republican and the Democratic Party, much more regulatory. So it's still a debate today. Overwhelming, the majority of Americans would think some regulation of business is a good thing. But that doesn't, once again, no absolutes. It depends on your perspective, right? You can make a point that monopolies are maybe not a bad thing necessarily. They can be anti-competitive and anti-consumer, but maybe they didn't become monopolies without already offering a good product and without already offering good prices. So maybe because they already did that, maybe that's how they got to that point. I don't know, because once you get to the point of a monopoly, would anybody really want Microsoft to control the entire software industry? It's a debatable issue. You can see points either way right there. And I certainly don't talk about my politics on these videos or in my classes. But on the pros and cons of monopolies, typically today we look at it as more as a negative, and that's why the U.S. government has decided to outlaw them in the United States. Another thing about regulation, if you do not regulate a business, sometimes, well, things can happen. Nobody's looking out for the employee right there. And what we see during the 19th century, when we take a look at worker conditions, things were very, very difficult. The typical work week goes into a little bit in the textbook. It doesn't give you some severe examples, but typically workers worked between 60 to 70 hours a week, which really isn't that big a deal. I always think we have a lot of students here that are full-time students and full-time workers at the same time. Your work schedule is probably much more than 60 to 70 hours when you combine school and work together. But the wages being paid were extremely low. They were working 60, 70, maybe hours a week just to barely get by, right? And the wages did not rise appropriately with the economy. Well, why not? Because it wasn't in a business's best interest. If a company starts paying their employees more, they're not spending as much to develop new products and to sell more products, right? And it was seen in the late 19th century that worker happiness was, they didn't care. Nobody cared about that. They cared about expanding the business, particularly since what's driving a lot of this is immigration into the United States. And the United States, particularly business owners, did not look as immigrants as, with much respect. Let's just put it nicely, and to put it very bluntly. And so you had a massive workforce coming in, people wanting jobs. You had more workers than jobs available. There's no drive to raise raise salaries, to raise wages, and the U.S. government wasn't enforcing any regulation on this too. There was no minimum wage or anything like that. And then you can take this to extreme examples. So think about your job, and maybe you hate your job, right? I tell you what, I bet you like your job more than you would if you were a steel worker working for Andrew Carnegie during the turn of the 20th century in the late 19th. If you worked at the Homestead plant in Pittsburgh, this was your work schedule. You worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, right? Every day of the year for the rest of your life. That was your schedule. You actually did get 1 day off a month. You got 24 hours off. The reason you got that day off a month, though, is because they had two shifts, the 8 in the morning shift till the 8 in the evening shift, and then switched over from 8 in the evening till 8 in the morning, right? And steel plants have to constantly be going. They can't just turn off those furnaces. But they thought it was unfair that, one person was on the day shift, one person was on the night shift, so every month you switch from day to night shift. But to keep the plant constantly running, the day before you got your day off, went to the new shift, you had to work a 24-hour shift. So you work there all day. Now imagine what your life is like, right? You had to be there at 8 in the morning, so you wake up, you kiss your wife, hug your kids, eat a little breakfast, you're out the door. We're going to spend the 12 hours working in a hot, dangerous environment like a steel mill. You get home after 8 o'clock, right? You come home, you kiss your wife, hug your kids, eat some dinner, and you go to sleep. And you wake up and you do that again the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day for the rest of your life. So why do people do it? And this is what we're getting in the industrial economy, because you had to. You had to earn wages. There were no other opportunities, right? You didn't have the money to leave Pittsburgh, right? You came into Pittsburgh, you had a job, and this is what you had to do. These were the jobs, right? And if you didn't like it, and you wanted to stand up about it by yourself, well, guess what? You're out the door, and they're going to hire somebody that was willing to work it because you had to have a job, right? But as this got worse and worse, and as this continued more and more in the 19th century, a lot of workers were realizing individually they didn't have much power. But there's strength in numbers, right? So imagine, imagine me in my job. Let's say I need to go talk to my boss about something, and I was angry at my job. I am not. I love my job. But let's say I was going to talk to my dean, and I go in there by myself, me in the history department, and I bang on it. Oh,